Welcome to the News, Information, and Truth in Polycrisis Futures workshop presented by Mercedes Baltazar. She's an international specialist in future design, combining strategy, narrative, and future vision to solve problems that change the world. The session will last 30 minutes, although we have 20 minutes left. If there's any part we can compress, that would be ideal. It will be recorded. My name is Caressa. I'll be providing support for the rest of the session. And please note that you've been muted, but you can submit questions anytime via comments or via the Q&A or via chat. Thank you so much. Mercedes, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm very sorry for the timeline mixed up. I was, in my head, it was tomorrow, but it was just because of the Paris timeline. So I am Mercedes, and I have been doing futures research around the futures of journalism and the futures of news. And now I am evolving that part of the research, talking about not only what we are seeing in the news industry, but also how is that impacting our perception of truth. Now, the other day I was doing a workshop around how AI was going to impact the role of news creation and fake news, and how it's going to change our perception of truth in the next years. Because well, we are now like in the post-truth scenario in a way, right? When we don't even know if we're facing an algorithm, if it is made by ChatGPT, or if the image that we're looking is as it is. With that in mind, I have been running a couple of workshops, mainly with students of journalism, trying to have their imaging of the future, the news of the future that they will have. And there's a lot of interesting things. But first, I would like to start talking about trends, signals, and emerging issues around the news realm. So this looks very little, but I'm gonna. After recollecting certain signals for the past years, I have come across to these specific trends that could be or can be ruling the future of news in the next 10 years. This was made through first some interviews with media directors and reporters, the ones that are in charge of innovation mostly, and reporters in Mexico and one in Spain, around what they were doing. Also, there was horizon scanning and a trend recollection. And with that, using FAR, we created these trends. So our first trend is replaced by robots, where trade and economic news could be generated by well-trained AI, and analysts might not be needed. So this trend is also supported by all the rules that have been presented by big news like New York Times, Washington Post, and how we are trusting a lot of the content creation into ChatGPT. Another trend is the one algorithm to rule us all, in which algorithms will be the next gatekeeper. It means the ones that decide what is relevant and what is not. So news will be drafted to please the algorithm and not to tell the truth. And this is really relevant when we're considering, or when we're looking at wars like what's happening right now in Israel, but also Ukraine, and like the modern wars, where the coverage is not only privileged depending on the clicks and what the algorithm offers, but the potential of this in the near future. And when I'm saying near future, I'm thinking the next 10 years. Is something to consider when we're talking about what is truth, what are the news, and how we privilege certain crises in this polycrisis scenario. Then we have goodbye paper, which is, this is like a claim saying that the print media will not survive. We will only have editions for collectors or special editions, but the decadence that we're seeing in print media will continue. And the other trend that we're looking at is the hyper-personalization, when we're looking not only about niche, but the niche of the niche. The audience would look for news outlets that resonate entirely with them and their interest. So this not only, when we're talking about interest, we're not only talking about the type of information that they want to get, but also what connects with their feelings, emotions, and what they think is true. Then we have, this one applies a lot for the media here in Latin America, that's called silver or persecution, when all the public advertisement investments will be only like the only able channel to provide economic viability, and that would make the media completely aligned to governments, which in the type of governments that we're looking at a lot of dictator-like governments. I'm thinking, for example, in El Salvador. This one is one of the positive ones, because not all is negative, that it is around diversity. So it's expected to have more women and different genders having directive roles. That would change the leadership style and the news organizations ideally. Then we will be having more collaboration between media. So it's not only about like one reporter freelancing for all, but also little nuggets or smaller media joining together to create bigger projects. The other one is the exodus to corporate that we're leaving right now in a lot of countries. Mexico is one of them. I know the US is another one, where journalists don't find their way in the media because of the awful labor situation, the layoffs, and all the pressures. So they end up becoming part of either corporate media or PR. And last but not least, and I think this is one of the most interesting trends, is journalists as the new founder. But because there are a lot of young journalists that are building, coding, and generating new business models that are providing different options to get informed that are not like the mainstream media, but are also a little bit more serious than the digital ones. So when we're talking about like signals, specifically in signals, these are very interesting signals that I've been looking around for the last year. One is the slowdown of the social media news consumption. Specifically, when we're talking about now X, they have the measurements say that the traffic that comes from the links that are shared in X is not really significant for the media. And this is interesting because we are facing also the clickbait, like the clickbait kingdom, where click is king. And specifically the digital media is concerned around getting clicks and not actually telling the news. But when we do the mix with what social media is bringing up, then it makes no sense. So probably we're looking at a potential death of the clickbait. Then there was a very interesting column written by a robot using AI that was actually saying negative things about AI in journalism, considering it as the only content creator. Like it should be a facilitator, but not a content creator, as it has been looked at. Then we have a lot of mass layoffs, mainly in the US, but I think that's the same, or I can say that's the same in the rest of Latin America. And right now, since we are coming close to election years for several countries, this is a stress again for democracy. Then we have the ethical implications around AI. I think this is not only for journalism, but the newsrooms are facing this debate. Okay, if we have now AI creating our content, who did it? Like, is there a reporter? If the reporter used ChatGPT or any other option of AI, of narrative AI, was the piece from him or not? And more important here for me is the trust building failing for online media. So this, when we're adding it up to the burnout crisis and to the TikTok as our new way of getting information, stresses a lot when we think about how the future generations are going to be informed and what they're going to believe. And when I say future generations, I'm talking about like the younger ones. What I'm going to show you quickly are a couple of media from the future that were created by people that are between 20 and 25. And it's very interesting to see what they understood as trends and what stresses them out. Not all is bad news. We have also different approaches, like starting to think of new products as instead of remaining with the same way of doing journalism, because this is just killing it. Like this was the year with less students in journalism in the Complutense University in Madrid, which is one of the bigger ones and like the icons. So we're moving away from, this means that we're moving away from the Hemingway cliche to more of a mix of not totally engineer, but multi-skilled journalism, because we need to get, well, news needs to go to Gen Z and millennials who are not engaging. Why? Different things. Fatigue, information fatigue, because there are certain studies that say that probably our brain is not ready to be connected to the news 24/7. Then the traditionalism, how the news are told in a very traditional way. How they cannot engage with this kind of media, and also what is called like news anxiety, because lately in this banning world we have not been providing a lot of good news. So with this context, and I promise I'll be on time, with this context, I approach some of my students and ask them the question: how would you imagine a news outlet from the future, or the media from the future? They started a very, I would say, a very not very formal foresight process, but they did all the stages. They did a little bit of research to collect some signals of change. They did a little bit of they used Wheel of Futures to try to think of consequences, and then they came up with their prototypes. So what I'm going to share with you is some of the prototypes. And I would say that for me, part of the most interesting thing is how they, like, their concerns. So I'm trying to do this again. Give me 1 minute. So one of the things that we have been talking about is the potential of death of the written media. So what they watched, or what they were looking at, was that we're absolutely in the transition for the digital from the print to the digital, but now they will be having artificial intelligence, augmented reality, news that were written by robots, but mostly immersive experiences. So what they imagine to be the evolution of the written media will be something that is more of an immersive new format that includes all the other formats in the same way. So they are thinking of something that we'll be doing in the wearables, that where even publicity or advertising will be like completely immersive, and all the print media, including books, will be having something that will be enhanced by technology. So what they see is more of immersive news station that is with news that are being fed by users, but also by artificial intelligence 24/7, where you can even leave a thermic sensation, where you can even have certain biases because of all the programming, where the programming of the robots is. They see a lot of censorship, and they see some platforms that are made for and by kids to include them in the same realm. And now I'm going to share another example, and then a little bit of the conclusions of this project, because I think that one of the most relevant things that I have found in this project is, first, that there is an interest of to be informed once they explain it to them. Like, once they understand the use of media, there is an interest in younger generations. So what this group decided that was going to be part of the news of the future was just positive news, was an immersive experience in all the subway lines of Mexico City, where they could only receive positive news. And all the stimulus that was like only to see, to hear, and even like smell was coming from nature elements that probably are not around anymore, because we're talking about like 12 years from now. So you could smell flowers, trees, rain, you could hear rain, wind, birds, and you can have, while this is happening, you're seeing a reel of all the things that are the current events that are happening, but focusing only on the good news. Also, there were textures during all the walls, and it's meant to be for all the people that uses the subway every day. And they even created this like this little reel on how they imagine this immersive experience on getting the news every day, every morning. And this would be like a government sponsored news way of getting it. One of the interesting things that comes from this experiment, there's another one, but I don't have time to share it, but I will just share the idea. For that one of the concerns of the students was this one was a very censored media outlet, but only for the right causes. So it was a lot of like the extreme of what they fear now, that is the cancel culture. And where if you're not aligned to a certain way of thinking, that whatever that is in 2035, you will not be able to connect or to even get different perspectives of what's going on. So for me to close this experiment, or this first phase of the experiments, it's very interesting the difference or the different things that younger audience focus on when we're talking about trends, but also when we're talking about media, because for them, the traditional media right now is not even relevant. Like they are not consuming, they're not reading, they're not watching the news. They have a very high interest in protecting their own mental health to what's going on. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to be informed. But in the end, one of the things that we discovered or that we have discovered through these experiments is that they are very, there's a high possibility of an extreme biased information dilemma, where since the audience will be preferring certain things to align to their mental health, to their well-being, to the topics that they're interested in, on and on, without connecting with others that are interested in current events that we are now. If we don't do anything, then we will be having a society that will be very vulnerable to different truths and to be used for different reasons. The purpose of this project is not only to have a collection of future devices or future design, a speculative design thing for the news, but also to talk about what we need to be doing and what the organizations need to be doing to increase media literacy, and try to understand the changes and the consequences that this could bring in terms of society. I'm thinking about certain electoral processes, for example, the one that we're having in Argentina now, where most of the things that have been running around TikTok or even Discord are way away for the original and traditional coverage. So there's a gap when we're trying to go to the next generation, which is the one that will be not only consuming but producing the news in the 2035. So I think I did it on time, and I don't know if anyone has a question.
Brilliant. Yes. So, Mercedes, I'm wondering, what advice would you give people who are mentoring or working with young people who are consuming media in this way? Um, how can we hold space for them and maybe even provide guidance for them as they try to navigate this space?
That's a very good question. I think it's opening up also about what is the news, or what are the news outlets, because there are very interesting exercises right now in TikTok, YouTube, that's where they are gathering information. So for me, one of the things that is crucial is media literacy, to support any activity, organization, or attempt to create some media literacy basics, because this is one thing that is a very interesting change from other generations. The consumption of news is something that you watch at your house. In my case, for example, I come from a place of two journalism, so for me there was no way of escaping. But right now, the parents, I'm like the millennials that are parenting the next generation, they are not that used to do it. So it's not something that they used to understand, do, or actually consume. This is where the hyper niche is very interesting, because it's not that they're not interested, but they're interested in very specific things. So they might be creating very deep investigations around, here, for example, K-pop. And then one thing that I found very interesting is that while they're doing some research on K-pop, they start gathering and getting more information around the news and current events around Korea, because they want to understand it better. So I think it's more approaching like a less traditional role on how we say the news. Like, I think that what's completely disconnected is this idea of the anchor man or the anchor woman and all the subs coming around, and like the very rigid form of presenting news. We have to make a way of making it more interesting, because it's starting to, and also the saturation. It is impossible for the brain to keep up with something 24/7. It's too much. We do need a break.
Stressor. Yeah.
It's a complete stressor. And then you have the doom scrolling, and then you have, like, have you heard? And there's a lot of things going around. And also it becomes very complicated to get like information now. So, but however, it is really relevant, because what the information that we get shapes our decisions. So in a way, it shapes the future. So I guess I would go back to media literacy and critical thinking to question what you're getting.
Great answer. Thank you so much. If people have other questions for you about your presentation, where should they send them?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna put like, this is my email.
Perfect.
And you can find me in LinkedIn like Mercedes Baltazar.
Okay, we're going to send that to all of the participants here. Make sure nobody misses it. Well, thank you so much, Mercedes. That was a great
Thank you.
presentation. I'm so sorry about
Gracias,
the rush.
Mercedes.
No,
Muy
sorry
buena.
for me.